Boom. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? We're on StreamYard tonight, so we can host some people. I don't know if anybody's going to stop through, but it gives us the option. YouTube's too restrictive with that. I don't know why YouTube can't figure that out. How's everybody doing? Let's see. Boom. Here tonight to talk about immigration. It's a hot topic. Everybody's got an opinion, right? Everybody's got an opinion about immigration, period. Doesn't matter who you are. So we're going to hear some different people's opinions, you know? What do people think? Tommy Thunder, what up? I don't like the what's called tonight. I don't like the lighting tonight. There we go. Oh, maybe like that. Gang, gang. Stacy, what up? Tommy Thunder. I mean, it's a question, right? Because it's been a question, you know, for the last 20 years. We've seen what's happened. We've seen what's happened throughout Europe, the European migrant crisis, Syria, Lebanon, all these different places. You know, Germany let in close to 1 million refugees from North Africa in one form or another. And they've paid the price. Sweden, many of the Nordic countries have let in a lot of people. And, you know, there's good and bad that come along. We tend to focus on the bad. Mario, what up? We tend to focus on the bad because that's how the media is. If it bleeds, it leads, right? So they'll tell you about, you know, there's some immigrant over here that raped some girl or did this or did that. See, show comments on the stage. There we go. Let's see, enable chat overlay. Core. Let's see if that works. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. I don't know. Come on, piece of crap. No, we'll get rid of that. Oh, get rid of that. The streets and the gang. Man, I don't know who made that little video with Little Smokey, but that shit's hilarious. Little Smokey, Little Smoke Dog. Good job. No, but serious. Everybody's got something to say. You ask your grandma about immigration, they're going to tell you about. You ask your grandma, you ask your mom, you ask your coworkers, whether they're pro-immigration, whether they're against immigration. Everybody's going to tell you. Everybody's got a point of view on the situation, right? And there's positives and there's negatives, right? But we tend to highlight the negatives, right? We tend to highlight the crazy stuff that people do, right? But for every murder that is committed by an immigrant, you know, there's 50 families that are doing great, you know. They're coming, they're assimilating. I mean, even the immigration into this country just from south of the border, from Mexico, you know, the vast majority of the Mexicans that come over here to work their ass off just come here to work their ass off. That's all they want to do. But that's not the stories that we hear, right? Those aren't the stories that get shoved in our face. And you know, there's an argument there too, because what do they say? You know, if there's a bowl of 1,000 M&Ms in front of you and somebody tells you, well, one of them's poison, are you going to eat them? No, you don't know which one's poison. Immigration's the same way. Let's see. Mario says, my whole apartment complex is immigrants. I don't have an issue with any of my neighbors, honestly. And, you know, I never have either. Where I'm from in Denver is majority Mexican and Vietnamese. The Vietnamese mind their goddamn business for the most part. I got to give them that. You know, people in the hood tend to mind their business anyway. But these Vietnamese people, they be they act as if you're not even there. I mean, they just live their lives. They live their lives. They go to work. They do whatever they're going to do, and they don't bother anybody at all. You know, but now, it's always been an issue of immigration. I can remember growing up. My best friend's name was Jessica, and her grandmother. Everybody knew her grandmother was illegal. And because of that, grandma didn't like the cops. She didn't want no problems at the house. You know what I mean? You had to act right whenever you were at grandma's house, if you were around grandma's house, because grandma didn't want the cops there. Cool. No big deal. But it wasn't like grandma was in dire. It wasn't like grandma was going to be dragged away if the cops found her. It was just she didn't even want the heat regardless. That's how it was for a long time as far as the Mexicans were concerned. There was a lot of illegals in this country, but if you didn't do anything stupid, they'd leave you alone. Here for the laughs. What up, brother? Talking illegal immigrants. Kind of got a problem with that. What's the issue? You pro immigration? Against immigration? You pro illegal immigration? Against illegal immigration? You know? I mean, the 3 and the 10-year bars. They did the 3 and the 10-year bars back in the day. And the 3 and the 10-year bars meant that if you were in this country illegally for under a year, if you turned yourself in and voluntarily self-deported, you had to go stay in Mexico for 3 years. If you stayed in Mexico for 3 years, then you could come back legally. The 10-year bar was if you had been in America for over a year, you had to voluntarily self-deport, and you had to stay in Mexico for 10 years. Now imagine that. If you'd been in America for 10, 15 years, living your life or whatever, and they decided, no, we don't want you here anymore, right? And what they did was they made the laws retroactive. In the 90s, they decided that anybody that had been committed of any crimes at all, convicted, if you were a Mexican and been convicted of a crime, you could be deported. And they expanded it to a lot of crimes. It used to be just like murder, kidnapping, things of this nature, drug trafficking. And they expanded it to everything, to shoplifting, to all kinds of stuff, right? So basically, it was a blanket. We can deport you basically if we want to. So they changed the laws and they made the law retroactive. So you could be a man who, whenever he was 18, 19 years old in the 1970s, he got in a fight with somebody and got like a misdemeanor assault or something like that, shit that young kids do. And then you could go live your life for 25 years in the United States. You could pay taxes, you could have a job, get a college degree, do all the things that you wanted to do. And then all of a sudden in the 90s, they made the laws retroactive. And now they could kick you out for what you had done 25 years before. And they said, not only can we kick you out, if you want to come back the legal route, you have to leave for a decade. You just built a life in America for 25 years. And they said, yeah, you're going to have to put that on hold for a decade. You got to volunteer. If you want to be legal in this country, you need to voluntarily self-deport and give us a decade in Mexico. That's unreasonable in a lot of people's eyes. I see you guys. I see everybody. Good to see you, fellas. Irony. Jordan, I see you. What's cracking? It's good to see you too. Here for the labs. Immigrant kind of got a problem with that. They made it, it's complicated, right? Because then you look at people like, there's many people of Mexican descent who claim that, the Southwestern United States, that belongs to them anyway, right? That they got hosed out of the situation. Basically, they lost that part of the country in a war. I mean, America did technically buy it, right? Texas, California, New Mexico. They did technically buy it from Mexico, but it was only after they had kicked Mexico's ass in a war, right? And Mexico didn't have a choice, and Mexico had to take the offer that they were given. Got any more dead body stories? I don't have any more dead body stories, brother. That's the first time that I've had to deal with the homicide detectives. Let's see, with what's going on in New York City, NYC, with the illegals beating up cops and being released right after that, I have an issue with that. You know, New York City is a victim of its own nonsense, and it's much like Seattle and much like San Francisco. Policies have consequences, and not only because they're enacted, but whenever policies are enacted and then people scream that, like the minute that New York did away with cash bail, everybody knew. Like everybody knew. They brought it to everybody. You know what I mean? They're screaming it in the streets. The news talks about it and everything. So now everybody knows that they're not going to lock you up. Everybody has a list of crimes that they're like, well, even if I get caught for these things, they're still going to let me go, no matter what. So Venezuelan now has opened up a whole new. The Venezuelans have opened up a whole new can of worms, though, right? This ain't Mexican immigration. This is something else. Any more dead body stories? Trump's wife came over here on an Einstein visa. Did she really? I know she's a whatchamacallit. You should start your intro with "You guys want to see a dead body." Yeah, we're here to stay. Live with us in peace, or there will be war. Right? That's 100% true. It's bullshit. They're doing that to the Raza from Mexico. Everyone else can go. Well, there's that too. You know what I mean? There's a serious argument, right, for the cats from Mexico, because they say, hey, we used to own that spot. That was Mexico, and you guys took it from us. Okay, fair enough. How far does that extend, right? Because Mexico got Mexico's got a wall on its southern border, right? They don't want the what's on Mexico's southern border? Is it I don't even know what the hell's down there. Panama? No, it's not Panama. Ecuador? Something like that. What's on the southern end of Mexico? Let me look that up. Maybe El Salvador. Let's see. I don't like to talk about immigration too much. To me, it's crossing a line. Okay. All right. Like camping is intense. Yeah. Let's see. Mexico. I'm not 100% sure what's on the Mexican southern border. I know they have a wall down there. It's not Panama. Mexico. Southern. Is it El Salvador? Guatemala. Share boundaries with Guatemala and Belize. And they don't want the Guatemalans in it, right? They're very open about it. Stony Tony didn't believe your dead body stories. Oh, no. Stony Tony didn't believe me. Let's see. Immigration jokes and borderline offensive. Oh, the past, present, and future walked into a room. It was tense, right? Central America. Let's see. If anyone is in a position to shoot a little something to the channel, would be much appreciated. Thank you, brother. All tips and contributions via the super chat. Good looking out, brother. Yeah, man. Like, share, subscribe, man. Run the likes up. Run the likes up, my friends. Let's see. Someone asked me how I feel about immigration. Apparently, on the fence is the wrong answer. More dead body stories. I can't, bro. That's making stuff up. I don't have any more dead body stories. I don't, let's see. Do I have any more dead body stories? I mean, I got stories. I got some good stories, but just not a huge fan of dead bodies. I tend to kind of shy away from them. You know what I mean? But we're looking at the Venezuelans now, and they're talking about like Trump just ended all of the protections for these people. So they're talking about, they I think they said there's 240,000 Venezuelans they let into the country. They're saying that almost none of them were vetted properly. Almost none of them were vetted properly. They're going through all the paperwork now. And what they found, this is something I seen on Cash Jordan. If anybody knows who Cash Jordan is, good YouTuber, man. And they're saying that they'll find 10, 15,000 applications for asylum only, or they said something like 15,000 of these asylum applications were submitted from the same IP address. That means that these people in New York, New Jersey, stuff like that, these liberals are creating houses where they're doing massive amounts. They're just running immigrants through there all day, and they're doing the paperwork for them, right? And so, and this is a violation. This is a violation of a bunch of shit. It's an ethical violation, and it's probably fraud. And so they're saying this is where, whenever you see on the news, they start talking about Trump. They say Trump's offering people a reward to self-deport. Well, this is why. Is because clearly your application was submitted in somewhat of a fraudulent fashion. And so they're saying, he's saying, hey, you know what I mean? This wasn't the best route anyway. This wasn't the most transparent route anyway. How about you guys go back? We'll give you some money to go back so you don't go back broke. Let's see, I watch Cash Jordan every day. That dude is great. He does have a great channel. The rules don't like Dennis because they're straight. South Africans need to be vetted better as well. Only 4% of Texans think immigration is a problem. The other 96% say evil. Tony actually has a hilarious monologue about the gangish body stories. Respect, does he? Is it funny? Hey, if it's funny, it's funny, bro. If it's funny, it's funny. You can't argue it. You know what I mean? It is what it is. Stony Tony. Stony Tony's a character. But, I mean, you know, there's people all over the world that are in a bad spot, right? And we didn't do anything to earn the spot that we have. We have a beautiful spot here in America. We have a beautiful country, rich country. There's opportunity everywhere. There's education everywhere. And much of the world isn't like this. And we didn't do anything to earn this. We're not any better than the rest of these people. So do we have an obligation to let them in, or to let some people in? How many people in? Do we only let the people in that are better than us? Or like they're not better than us, that will make our country better, right? Because that's, for a long time, they only took, they would only take scholars or doctors or scientists or engineers and stuff like that. But this contributes to a brain drain. There's an ethical problem with this. Whenever you're taking all the technocrats out of a country that's already impoverished, it's not doing very well anyway. It could really use some engineers there, and we're telling them, no, come over here. There's an ethical issue there. See, so how much of a duty do we have to the rest of the world? Or do we just lock all the gates? I mean, we're one of the only countries in the world where you can get caught as an illegal and you won't go to jail right away, right? Vast majority of the world, if you get caught in a country illegally, you're going to jail. You're going to jail, and you might end up with a prison sentence for whatever felonies they drum up, entering the country illegally, whatever. You know, we don't do that. We consider ourselves more ethical. We consider ourselves more humanitarian, you know. And then we can always talk about the role that we had to play in destabilizing whatever country these people come from. Because there is a role to play, you know. We've been much more isolationist. America has over the last 50 years. We tend not to meddle as much. That doesn't mean we don't meddle in countries, but we used to do it really, really bad, you know. But Honduras, there's a direct link between us, the problems going on in Honduras, right? South America, we keep South America destabilized. We do it on purpose because in the 1960s, Cuba had the audacity to put some nuclear missiles on their island from Russia and point them at us. And if you've noticed, Cuba hasn't made much progress since the 1960s. That's what happens whenever you threaten us. They're basically on our doorstep and they threaten us. And so we've shut their country down. They think people think we have an embargo on Cuba, that we're not allowed to trade with Cuba. We're the only thing keeping Cuba alive, right? We didn't make it's illegal to trade with Cuba, but we give Cuba just enough money and food and resources and energy to survive. We are the main benefactor of Cuba. We are the people who supply Cuba with the things that they do have. Fellas? Do we just leave our borders open? No, I wouldn't think so. That would clearly be a bad idea. I don't think that's a good idea at all, for one thing, because we need to know who's coming in. The debate can still be had about how much immigration we should have into the country, but we need to know who's here. No matter what, we need to know who's here. See, HFTL says, I visited Australia a long time ago. They asked if I had a criminal record. I asked if that was still required. Yeah, my understanding is they don't let criminals in at all. Australia, Japan. I remember whenever Japan wouldn't let Snoop Dogg in. They were like, oh no, homie. Thoughts on Che Guevara? Read a book on Che Guevara. Miss Thang, what up? Good to see you. Che Guevara was a rich kid. Much like most socialists, how most socialists start out. They start off as rich kids. I mean, he was an activist. He believed in what he was doing. He was also a criminal. I mean, he was a criminal, and I think if I remember right, he'd been charged with some shit that wasn't great. But he tried to go into business for himself a couple times. It never seemed to work out. Passionate dude. It's not very hardworking. Not very entrepreneurial. Let's see. Please subscribe and share. Let's see. Please subscribe and share. Also, if you'd like to become a member, please do. There's affordable membership packages with extra perks, etc. Good looking out, my friend. Run them likes up, my friends. It's good to see you guys tonight. I'm almost got rid of this shitty ass phone. I'm so close to being done with this phone. I got a new phone coming in the mail here any day. I'm stoked about the new phone because this thing sucks. Boom, 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 boom. Let's see if I can even pull this out. Let me pull it up so I can actually see what's going on here. Yeah. I start my job on Thursday. Start my job on Thursday. went and got a bunch of clothes. I need to go get an iron. Some of these clothes are wrinkled. Let's see. Turn this down. I know. Turn that shit down. Boom. But I grew up in California, where I grew up in Northern California. The immigrants were thick. The Mexicans were thick, and that was just part of the backdrop. There, it was just normal. And they never bothered us. You know what I mean? They never bothered us. They were cool. I was cool with them. It was nothing but love. You know what I mean? Nothing but respect. So I have my own feelings about, my own feelings and thoughts about immigration. But the Venezuelans brought a new set of standards to immigration, right? A new set of behavior. It wasn't like that before. We've never really had immigrants come into this country and act the way the Venezuelans did. That's never been a thing before, right? They described it to me as New Jack City. Some of the stuff that they were doing here around Denver, like they were coming in here just like the mafia or something like that. Now, I'll tell you, there's a couple spots here in Denver where they're really centralized, where the Venezuelans are really centralized. One of them was Spear and I-25. And that place, it looked like a fucking a Rio de Janeiro fucking ghetto. I mean, they took what the government did is they went around during the pandemic, whenever they needed all these places, they went around everywhere and they found all these hotels where these women had been prostituting for years and people have been selling drugs and all this other stuff for all these years. And they basically bribed people and said, hey, check it out. You're going to sell us your hotel because you're an asshole and you've been letting people sell drugs out of here and things of this nature. So you're going to sell us your hotel at this price or we're going to take it from you. We're just going to take it from you as a public nuisance. We're going to call it a public nuisance. We'll just seize it. And so people, oh, okay, sure. And they sold it to them. So now the government has control of all of the worst hotels in Denver. And they filled them up with Venezuelan immigrants and people who are high on fentanyl. What could go wrong? And so that's kind of where we've been over the last year. So now, since Trump got in, they decided, no, the Venezuelans got to go. And so they're yanking all the people off the streets who were smoking fentanyl. And they're giving them places to go. So basically, unless you're a complete asshole in the city of Denver right now, they'll give you a place to go. It is paid for. I know people living in these hotels. They're living in hotels all over the city and rent-free, right? Which I don't know if it's a good thing. I don't know if it's a bad thing. I mean, the vast majority of them are still smoking fentanyl, so you don't have to be sober to be in there. So now all of them are just in there smoking fentanyl, and now they just got a hotel. Now they're just not smoking fentanyl out in the elements, I guess, which, I mean, that's a good thing. You don't want people dying out there. And they're deporting the Venezuelans. So all of these hotel rooms are starting to pop up. All these hotels are starting to pop up with more and more. So they're actually cleaning up the streets. This seems to be the solution they've had for cleaning up the streets of Denver. Which, I mean, that's the old trope that they say, we've got people here who need help. We don't need to be spending money other places. Okay, fair enough. Makes sense. Let's see some of these comments. Let's see. John Paul, the first served for 33 days. He didn't die of a heart attack. I don't know what that's about. I didn't even pay attention whenever wanted to reform the entire papacy. John Paul I wanted to reform the entire papacy, including the Vatican Bank. I've heard that before. Let's see. He served for 33 days. Let's see. Get that out of there. He didn't die of a heart attack. Jordan, looking forward to you and Big Weavy going live like the good old days. He put up a community post a couple days ago saying that would happen soon. Yeah, I'm trying to get with Weavy. The silent one. They would have come into Florida, tried to take over, and they would have been sent back in boxes. Thank God for stand your ground, castle laws, and constitutional carry laws. Yeah, they don't play that shit out here. There is a stand your ground law out here, but it's nothing like Florida's. Let's see. Mile High Hustle says it happened in 80s with Cuba. Castro released his prisons to come here. Yeah, I do remember something about that. That now the thing is with that is true, but at the same time, whenever you're talking about the prisons in a communist country, the vast majority of people who are in prison in communist countries are political enemies. They're not actually criminals. Now, there is criminals there too, but the idea in the old Soviet Union, whenever they were putting people in the gulags, was that enemies of the state were vile and disgusting, and that they were below a criminal, right? The communists figured that criminals were just criminals. That's what they did. They're just doing what criminals do. That's, that's the way that they are. But these ideologues that were against the state, the ones who were against communism, against the state, well, they were pieces of shit. So in the gulags, we learned about this from the Gulag Archipelago. If anybody knows what that is, a book written by a man named Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who he did, I think, 20-something years in a Russian gulag, and wrote down his memoirs about everything that happened. And he, in large part, was a reason whenever he was released in the 70s and his memoirs were released, the book called The Gulag Archipelago was released, we got to see without, before that, Russia was controlling the information about what they had done all throughout the revolution and the communist experiment and all these other things. They had controlled the information that came out of the Soviet Union. So we didn't really know. We didn't have hard proof. Well, whenever Solzhenitsyn was released and his memoir, that book, The Gulag Archipelago, it's like the size of 2 Bibles, right? That he wrote over a 20-year period. And he was a psychoanalyst. He was a very smart and intelligent fellow. And so his memoir proved what the horrors that had been taking place in the gulags, and they could no longer deny this, right? Let's see. And one of the observations that I remember from the book is that the prisoners, the criminals were placed in charge of the prisons. The actual criminals, murderers, robbers, thieves, things of this nature, were placed in charge of the political prisoners, right? The political prisoners had to play a lesser role than the regular criminals. And the reason why is because they felt that ideologues and enemies of the state were beyond reproach. They couldn't be helped. We might be able to help a prisoner. We might be able to punish him enough, give him enough time, and reform him, send him back into society. But these enemies of the state, these are pieces of shit, right? So they would put them in there at the whims of the actual criminals, knowing damn well what would happen to them. Think about what would happen if you just took a whole class. Think about what would happen if you just took all the Democrats and put them in prison, right? Or all the Republicans and threw them into prisons with the fucking with the rest of the criminals. The criminals are going to take advantage of them. The criminals are going to have a heyday taking advantage of these people because they're not gamed up the way that criminals are gamed up. They're not cutthroat the way that criminals, like I'm sure some of the politicians will get with the program, but the vast majority of them are going to get taken advantage of very bad. And the Russians did this on purpose. This is part of the Soviet system. So a lot of those, whenever you see the movie Scarface and stuff like that, they did send a lot of prisoners over here. They emptied out their prisons, said, hey, get the shit out of here, But a lot of those were political prisoners as well. To Mario Kaczynski, my head chef at work came here from parents that immigrated from Cuba in the 80s. Their success stories from that time and do prove that not all Cubans from then were bad people. 100%. 100%. They were, many of them, as I said, they were just political opponents. They were political opponents. And this is what the CIA, this is what the Bay of Pigs fiasco was, is that the CIA, knowing that there was a bunch of ideologues that had just been kicked out of prisons in Cuba, think about who you recruit. If you're going to recruit people that get kicked out of a prison, you're not going to recruit a bunch of riffraff and stuff like that. These were political ideologues. These were people who were really against socialism. They were really against Castro's government. They were against what Castro was doing in general. And so those are the people that they recruited. This is John F. Kennedy's biggest failure, right? This is the Bay of Pigs. This is why many of the Cubans aren't a fan of JFK. If anybody knows about the Bay of Pigs incident, the CIA trained a bunch of Cubans to go back into Cuba and try to overthrow the Castro government. And whenever it came down to it, Kennedy didn't want to be tied to the situation, and he refused to provide air support. He refused to provide the air support that was needed. And these Cubans were basically slaughtered on the beach at the Bay of Pigs. That's what happened. The whole thing just turned into an absolute disaster for the CIA and for the Cubans involved. So they had armed these Cubans and trained these Cubans and did all this shit for them to try to go help them take their country back. And then whenever it was time to bite the bullet, Kennedy left them hanging with no air support. They were supposed to have air support. To make a beach landing, you really got to have some fucking air support. And a lot of people got slaughtered. A lot of people died on the beach that day. And then the ones who didn't die, those are probably the ones who died were probably the lucky ones, because the ones who didn't die, many of them died after being incarcerated. They then got locked up as political prisoners. Many of them were executed. Many of them did a long time in Cuban prisons and never came out of Cuban prisons again. Some of them did, some of them didn't. But it wasn't a good time for anybody. Let's see. Action's not distractions. Good to see you, my homie. Silent one. Good to see you. Smash the like button. Run them likes up, my homie. Run them likes up. David Price. The Germans used the green triangle wearers, criminal prisoners, as capos. Inmates who beat and kept the others in line. Yes. In concentration camps as well as the Soviets. Yeah. And this is what, they gave those jobs to actual criminals. You know what I mean? The political prisoners were considered beyond reproach, beyond repair. You may have mentioned that already. I know I just got here. Yeah, you're 100% right. Yeah, they would keep, you always use people to keep other ones in line, right? They did this with the blacks, the American people, during slavery. They did the same thing. That's who kept the rest of the slaves in line, right? Was the head slave. Forging Thought. Gulag Archipelago, a great book. Gulag Archipelago, man, I didn't read it. I listened to it. Whenever I was a manager at this pizza restaurant, and I would be there for like 2-3 hours late at night, like shutting the restaurant down every night. And I would throw my headphones in and I would listen to it on Audible. I would listen to the Gulag Archipelago. I've listened to it maybe 3 times, dude. And it's just so fucking long, but it's so interesting. It's so interesting. And to imagine like what that dude, you know what I mean? Like they would have killed him. They would have killed Solzhenitsyn if they found if they found that book. They weren't allowed pens or pencils or writing utensils or paper or any of this thing. And this dude like wrote a fucking Bible and managed to like bury it in the walls or bury it in the sand or da 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 da, and talk about the horrors of what they would do, do to these people. They had a job. They had a job for people. If they were really pissed at you, they would have these sacks of salt, and they would wet them down, wet salt, 50-pound bag or something like that, and they would make the person pick up the sack of wet salt and just carry it across the yard, and then go across the yard to the other side and pick up another sack of wet salt and bring it back to this side of the yard. And they would do this because if you start, let's say they're making us slave labor and they're making us start a bridge or something like that, they're making us build a bridge. Well, you get a sense of satisfaction whenever the bridge is done. Even if you're doing slave labor or whatever, the bridge is done, the bridge is done. We finished the project. But you can never finish carrying a sack of salt or a sack of wet sand, because there's always more sacks of salt. There's always more sacks of wet sand, and so it's demoralizing. It breaks the human being down in their mind, right? David Price, Mario was good. Run them like some homies. Let's see. YouTube censors, I agree. What do you mean? What do they censor? So the Venezuelans come in here. They ran amok for a year, 18 months. They just been going for it, doing whatever the hell they wanted. Crap, what up? Let's see. This phone sucks. Let's see. Have you ever read up on Nazina Island? I have not. Nazina Island. What is that? We are mostly independents in here. Stick around and join the conversation. All right. What up? Man, I just try to find the truth. You know what I mean? Wherever the truth lies. Try not to go into things with the. Oh, Cannibal Island? Yeah, I do know what that is. Actually, I do know what that is. Yeah. They put a bunch of prisoners there, and whenever it all came down to it, a lot of the prisoners ended up eating each other. They ended up eating each other. Yeah, I do know what you're talking about now. Yeah, that shit is vicious. Can you imagine that? So, well, look at these, it's happening. It happened in Venezuela too. They said before the Venezuelans came here, they had emptied out what's called the zoo. They had emptied out the zoo and ate many of the animals. They let a lot of the animals go. And what they said is that they went in and killed some animals in the zoo. The Venezuelans killed some of the animals, and I don't know if I could blame them. If I was starving too, I probably would too. But they broke in, ate some of the animals in the zoo, and then some Venezuelan activists, some animal rights activists who were like, fuck that. You guys ain't eating all the fucking animals. Went in there and just let all the animals go. Right? Let's see. So it's like, do we owe people in our hemisphere? I mean, I would argue, that it does have something to do with geographical closeness, right? Like in Mexico, if there was a huge humanitarian crisis in Mexico and people were dying, right? If the Mexican economy collapsed and people were starving and, cannibalism was maybe going to be a reality, should we let those people in? Yeah. Probably. They're right there. They're our next door neighbor. We should probably do that, right? But do we have to do it to the entire world? You know, I don't know. How much responsibility do we have to the rest of the world? How much responsibility or guilt do we have for being born into a rich nation, right? Or is that just the way that's just the way of the world? You know, some people get a good shake, some people get a bad shake, and that's just it. That's just part of the human condition. That's part of evolution. That is what it is, you know. And it is part of evolution because if you think about it, you know, so they talk about black folks and they talk about the fast twitch muscle fibers. We know that Africans, African Americans, happen to have a higher density of fast twitch muscle fibers. Right? Why? Why is this? We also talk about, it's a little more controversial, but they talk about the IQ disparity. There is an IQ disparity between races. White people are not at the top. They're pretty much dead set in the middle. Jews generally tend to be the smartest people on the planet. It's both types of Jews. There's Sephardic Jews and then Asian Jews, and then there's and then it starts with the Asians, right? The Northeastern Asians, which are like Chinese and Japanese and stuff like that, are smarter. And then you got white people in the middle, and then it goes on down the line, right? And this is just IQ. Okay, so what would do this? Well, I've heard some arguments. You know what I mean? What would make black people have a higher density of fast twitch muscle fibers, but make white people have a higher IQ? Okay, just simply eating, the way that we eat, right? What do black people have to deal with? What do you have to deal with in sub-Saharan Africa, right? You have to deal with animals that will eat you, right? We didn't have a lot of that out here, right? In North America, even in Europe, there's not a lot of animals that will eat you. Wolves, basically, if they're really hungry, a wolf will attack a person. Bobcats, stuff like that, different types of cougars, things of this nature. But for the most part, there's not a lot of things that will eat you in Europe, right? But what does come to kill you in Europe? Think of Game of Thrones, right? Winter is coming. That's what will kill you if you're in Europe, especially in Northern Europe. If you don't store food, if you don't think about what you're doing, right? If you don't store food for the winter, if you don't store firewood for the winter, energy for the winter, things of this nature, you will die, right? If you don't stockpile things and do the right preparatory things that you need to do before winter comes in Northern Europe, you will not make it through the winter. This same problem, right? So you have to think, you have to use your head, and you have to plan ahead. And this is one of the things that is directly correlated with IQ, is the ability to plan ahead and think into the future and say, fuck, we need to plan what we're doing. Right? Now think about Africa. Do you need to plan to store food year round? No. It's hotter than shit and it's moist. The food will deteriorate. The food will grow rotten, right? You live in Scandinavia, you can just dig a hole and put the food in the damn ground. It's a fridge. The fridge is a ground. You do that in Africa, if the water doesn't wash it away, the food will rot or something will dig it up, right? But you have to worry about things eating you in Africa. So what's good whenever things are trying to eat you? The ability to run and get the fuck out of there, right? It's just a theory. I don't know if it's true, but we have to realize that different parts of the world are adapted for different things, right? And different cultures hold different values. And a culture like Venezuela has had these ideas instilled in them for the last 30 years. They've had the idea that the government is supposed to take care of you instilled in them. And many of those people brought those ideas here. Now, many of them that were out there working, You know what I mean? They were out there trying to clean windows, trying to do whatever they could to work. But the vast majority of them, not from what I've seen. Not from what I see. Now, I wasn't out in Aurora. I don't know a whole lot about what was going on in Aurora, but I know where this other epicenter was right there on Spear and I-25, what they call Spear and I-25. And them fools were posted up every day, just posted up, not doing a damn thing. The women be out there too, big old booty women just out there chilling, slanging pussy and shit. Let's see. That's wild. Not trying to take part in that spread. Yeah, I've read up about that island for yeah. They started hunting each other for food, battle royale. So yeah, yeah. They said one of the scariest sights you could see during the bad times of the Soviet Union was a fat dude coming down the street because nobody there just wasn't enough nutrition to be fat, and if you were fat, it was probably cannibalistic. Now, only the serious horror stories from the Soviet Union have managed to find their way out to us. So you really had to be like just an animal of a fucking cannibal for your story to be told. But we know that there was a lot of cannibalism that happened, right? You know, Russia tends to act like the Soviets tend to act like they don't have problems. They say homosexuality is not a problem in their country. The Chinese do the same. Oh no, we don't have that problem here. Well, yeah, you probably do. You know what I mean? I almost guarantee you do. That story is brutal. Yeah. Tell that to the Egyptians and Saudis regarding Gaza. Their walls on the border aren't coming down anytime soon. No, they're not. And the Jews have built a wall too, you know? And it's that's you know, the Egyptians, they can't stand they can't stand the Palestinians. They got nothing for the Palestinians, dude. The Saudis have a lot of their own problems, and they really don't. They just don't want the hassle. Nobody around there really wants anything to do with the Palestinians, and I have a feeling these Palestinians are getting a dose of the same thing the Venezuelans have, right? Because they've just basically been taken care of, quote unquote, taken care of, right? For the last 50 years or whatever, taken care of. They're basically kept in poverty. There's a complete embargo on building materials, and they're basically given enough to just sustain themselves, and it sucks. It sucks. I don't know what to do about the fucking Palestinians, dude. That's like the unsolvable problem right there. A lot of people, unfortunately, you hear a lot of people just talking about the Jews, just letting the Jews just fucking deal with it already. And it's like, man, that's how many Palestinians is there? 5 million or some shit like that? It's like, man, it's mass genocide, bro. It's mass genocide. Do we really want another Holocaust on our hands? Let's see. If we let all the cannibals in, then we will all end up as cannibals. Yeah. I don't trust seagulls. Hey, they say seagulls are vicious. They say seagulls are some of the most vicious things around. They'll attack anything. They attack whales. Like if a whale's got like a sore or something like that, they'll fucking land on the back of the whale and start ripping it apart. They'll eat chunks out of a fucking whale. Like those things are vicious. You shouldn't trust seagulls. They'll eat your fucking dog, eat whatever. Jack Mehov, haven't seen you in a while. Indians are highly intelligent as well. Dot, not feather. Indians are very intelligent. Yeah, it's whenever I can't remember his name right now. Whenever he came out with all that book, I can't remember the name of the goddamn book. He's a sociologist, a brilliant man at the American University in Washington, D.C. And whenever the bell curve, when the guy who wrote the bell curve, I can't think of his name right now. Whenever he wrote the book about the bell curve, Charles Murray, that's his name, Charles Murray. They absolutely demonized him, and they said he was a piece of shit, and they said he was a racist, and they said this and that for just, mentioning the fact that there's basically a disparity between there's IQ disparity between the races, and they just lambasted this dude, and they said he was a white supremacist and all this other shit, and he's not at all. The dude was a liberal, you know what I mean? And hello, sir. And they demonize this guy. You know what I mean? They demonize him. They turned him into something that he wasn't. They booed him off the stage at fucking Chicago University, and but it's irrefutable. You know, there is a disparity. There is an IQ disparity between the different races. This is just the way it is. White people ain't at the top, so it ain't white supremacy. White people ain't at the top. And it's Jewish supremacy, right? They say the Jews are at the top, and then they say, yeah, we knew you were fucking racist. You know? It's like the world is what it is. We evolve in different ways. We evolve for different things. We evolve for different reasons. And then whenever you have the social input of our government, whatever type of government we have, this has effects, within a couple generations. Think about how it is whenever you don't work for a month or two, and then you got to get yourself back into it. You're like, man, I got to shake this off. I got to get back into the workforce. I got to get myself used to working again. Well, think about that if you did that for generations, if you take care of all your people, if you just get, like these people in Cuba, what's the work ethic look like in Cuba? And that's not to say there's not hardworking people in Cuba. I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's plenty. But I bet you the vast majority of the population wouldn't be the best workers in the world, See, I saw a flock of seagulls today, and I ran. I saw a few videos from the USSR, people chopping up dudes with machetes walking down the sidewalk in the early 90s after the wall fell. Jesus Christ. You imagine that? During that small chunk of time whenever there was no government. Think about that. Everybody who was the oppressor, right? You got all these people that were they were part of the secret police and part of the Communist Party and all this other shit, and they were responsible, all the bureaucrats and the technocrats that were responsible for the horrors that happened. And then just all of a sudden that just falls, and everybody's just everybody now. Everybody's just a civilian. And you're looking around like, I remember you, fucking asshole. I remember what you were doing. During the Holodomor, people were selling human meat at market. There are photos online of the shit. Stalin put out the propaganda posters that said, I don't know. Let's see. But if anybody doesn't know, the Holodomor is whenever the communist system, the communist quota system, became responsible for the starvation death of millions and millions of Ukrainians. Basically, it was against the law to not report 100% of the grain. If you got caught stealing any of the grain that you grew, it was a death sentence. And so communism works on quotas. And so Ukraine says, oh, yeah, we filled the quotas because that was a death sentence, or they take your farm from you. So they'd say, okay, yeah, we filled all our quotas, and they'd take all the grain and throw it on the shit and send it back to Moscow. And then a bunch of people starved, right? Millions of people starved to death. And I'm sure there was some cannibalism. I'm sure there was. Means don't eat people, don't sell your kids to butchers. I have seen that. The posters that said, please remember, it is not okay to eat your children. Imagine that. Imagine how bad it got. Please remember, it's not okay to eat your children. Forging too long. Good to see you again. Yeah, it is good to see you, brother. He always comes with some intelligent shit. You know what I mean? I love that. We can get on here and have an ignorant conversation. We get on here and have an intelligent conversation, and unfortunately, the news whenever they talk about immigration and shit like this, they don't speak about it in an intelligent fashion. It's always the lowest common denominator, but or it's either the lowest common denominator, or it's, oh, these poor Venezuelans, or these poor Mexicans, or these poor this or poor that. And it's like, man, that's not helpful. I mean, it may be true. You can show a Venezuelan family and show the plight of the Venezuelan family, but what does one family have to do with the larger picture? We can't set public policy based upon an individual case. We have to look at the whole. And we have to look at the whole picture. That's how you set public policy. And, Trump has come in here like a hammer looking for a nail, for sure. And I'm almost certain that he's going to go too far. It seems like as if he'd already gone too far with some things. But I would say Joe Biden didn't go anywhere with any of it, right? He didn't manage the situation at all. He just encouraged all these people. Think about the amount of people that were coming into the country. They just opened the floodgates and just let these people into the country. They weren't, and now we know that there was thousands and thousands of people being registered at the same addresses, from the same physical addresses, from the same IP addresses. This is fraud, right? Is anybody going to pay the price for that? And so Trump's looking at that and he's saying these people got to get the hell out. I get it. And then the Venezuelans didn't help their case with the Tren de Aragua shit. And then, how the government is, they get a hold of, this new gang, just like they did with MS-13, this new gang, Tren de Aragua, blah, 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 And I have a feeling that Tren de Aragua has something to do with the immigration. A train of water, right? Tren de Aragua. It's train of water. I have a feeling that has something to do with flowing into the United States. I'm not positive about that. I haven't been able to get the backstory on where that name came from, but I know what it translates to. Let's see. Why they saying Dub is 5'4". Stupid. You guys are stupid. Have you heard of Jason from Archaics? If you haven't, checked it out. His channel is fantastic. He is an ex-con turned author, speaks on religious history, civilizations. Well, I gotta check him out. I heard Dub is on the run and heading to Mexico. Let's see. The pendulum has swung too far in both directions in the last, and that seems to be what we do now. You know what I mean? Everything is such. What do they talk about? The sanitization. Jonathan Haidt talks about the sanitization of the parties. Because 30 years ago we had conservative Democrats, right? Conservative Democrat was the thing. We have liberal Republicans. That's been sanitized. It's no longer a thing. It no longer exists. Parties have been sanitized completely, right? There's no more of that. Either you're on our side or you're not. There's no middle ground. That's not what you want. You know what I mean? Whenever we're talking about a sociological pendulum, it's not what you want. It's not good for anybody. We need a balance. If you think about, if you're a guy, if you think about what you want at home, what do you really want? You want some brutish woman? You know what I mean? Some brutish woman who works construction? No. You want me a liberal woman at home who cries a lot at movies and shit like that. That's what you want. You want something that balances you out. That's what the world's about. It's about balance, right? So I don't want to live in a world where we don't have Democrats, right? Where we don't have Republicans, liberals, conservatives. I don't want to live in that world. I want to live in a world of balance. You want to live in a world where everybody's represented, where people have champions, right, on both sides. Because if you go too far to one side, you know what you're going to get. It devolves, and that's what's the beauty of the American system, is they created a system. The founding fathers created a system where nobody, no matter how authoritarian Trump wanted to be, or Biden wanted to be, or whoever it was, you can only do so much. There's too many checks and balances. There's too many little things to keep you boxed in for somebody to make too radical of a change. See, her Dub is a fitness trainer. He puts all his clients on the hot pocket diet. I report reality when a juicy narrative gets more. Yeah, the news is just a horrible, horrible source of information anymore. They don't even, they're not helpful. The news isn't even helpful. They're not even helpful in disseminating information. You know, they spin it the way that they want it to be spun. Not helpful at all. Oh, what's up with Weavy? I need to go on Weavy's live too. I need to do one with Mile High Hustle too. Maybe I should challenge Boxer to a fight. Give Boxer a redemption. Does Boxer need a redemption, fellas? Amen. Did you see Stony Tony was trying to clown you on his life? Stony Tony always trying to talk crazy. That's all right though. Let's see. This thing says powered by StreamYard. I don't know. Well, I started the StreamYard over here. Let's see if I can get into my StreamYard on the computer. The thing is, though, I don't know. But the thing is, the whatchamacall's not set up on this fucking computer. The nothing's set up on this computer yet because I don't have a microphone on the computer, and I do have a set of headphones, but the microphone doesn't seem to work on them. Either the microphone doesn't work or I'm not doing it right. I'm not sure. Let's see. That's how I look at these YouTube channels I follow. Yeah, Mario. How's sobriety doing? I'm good, brother. I'm good. I feel good. I need to get back in the gym. I'm waiting until I got enough loot to get back. I once I get my first paycheck, I'm gonna be back in the gym with with Mile High Hustle. I'm gonna go over there and get my sparring in. But that gym's $60 a month. I gotta wait till I don't got that extra loot sitting around right now. I gotta wait till I get my first paycheck. Once I get my first paycheck, you'll start seeing some boxing videos again. Let's see. Is Big Weavy going live tonight? I don't know. I want to see you and Big Weavy talk. So Dub on the live. Talk about that. Got a boogie gang. Yeah, have a good night, my friend. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you for bringing some knowledge to the situation too. Some things to talk about. Appreciate it. Gangs forgive both Boxer and Gunner. I've seen a few videos hitting the right. They both have no chance. Well, no, but if Boxer took it a little more serious this time, I think he might be all right. You know what I mean? He got to get in there. You know, I knew Boxer was in trouble whenever I seen his training videos and I seen him hitting the weights. That's the complete opposite of what you need to be doing whenever you getting ready to box. You know what I mean? You have to get them fast twitch muscle fibers. You got to get them moving again. You got to get your hands moving again. Because once you really start boxing, your hands go on automatic. They just go automatically, and that's what you want. You need your hands to just fire off automatically so that you're not even thinking about them whenever you really get into boxing and shit like that. And the whatchamacalls are completely different. Building muscle with weights is completely different. Completely different. The slow twitch muscle fiber, slow controlled movements and all that shit. It's just not even the same, you know. So I knew Boxer was in trouble because I knew how much training Mile High Hustle had been doing, you know. But you know, Mile High Hustle is also in a lot better shape than me, you know. So Boxer might have a chance. See, what am I doing for work? So I got on at a motel, overnights at a motel, doing the overnight audit, and which is basically I don't know exactly what it is, like doing paperwork and stuff like that overnight, and like keeping the riffraff away because there's still a lot of homeless running around. A lot of homeless try to get into the places. They try to break into the places and squat and stuff like that. And so, you know what I mean? I got to chase off the homeless people, I guess. Are you big into weightlifting or more cardio based? I barely touch weights at all anymore, brother. I rarely ever touch weights. Push-ups, pull-ups, dips, running, hitting the bag. I want to get just back into hitting the bag, and I won't be doing much else but that once I get back in the boxing gym. Because that's all you need to do. You know what I mean? Your shoulders, whenever you really get to boxing, your chest will cave in. Your chest caves in, and your shoulders just get big, 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 big. Your shoulders and your traps and everything from having your whatcalls out in front of you, having your arms in front of you, throwing the punches out in front of you. It just builds your shoulders. Let's see. Running does help you lose weight. Bar workouts, 2 dips and pull-ups, yeah. Do you run? Not very goddamn fast. No, I'll jog every once in a while. I'll do a little bit of jogging every once in a while. Tends to keep your wind pretty good. You hit them punching bag, it tends to keep your wind pretty good. Teaches you how to it's one of the first things you learn in boxing is how to breathe. You know what I mean? When to breathe out, when to breathe in as you punch. You know, and that's once you get that down, you're able to kind of control your breathing. It's a big part of it. Control your breathing over a span of time so you don't gas out. Running helps you lose weight 5 miles a day. Whew, that's too much for me. Weight loss is 95% in the kitchen. That's 100% true. 100% true. Like you could force the issue. You could force the issue if you got all day. And I'll tell you why I know that. Because we used to feed the dudes in the kitchen in Buena Vista who were in boot camp. And these fools would lose fucking weight like you wouldn't believe. I seen a dude lose like 90 pounds in 90 days, right? And they're eating like trucks. Just eating. They're eating almost double servings of what you normally get in prison. So these dudes are eating 5,000 calories a day and just dropping weight. But they're driving these dudes. It's like a military boot camp, and they're driving these dudes into the ground. And whenever I was boxing in Walsenburg, I was losing close to about a pound to a pound and a half a week, every week, no matter what. And I'm eating like a fool because we're stealing out of the kitchen. This is where I stole all them hamburgers at. So we're eating good. I got caught stealing 18 hamburgers at Walsenburg. We're eating good. I mean, we're eating big fat spreads every night, eating all 3 meals, And I was still dropping weight, but I was also doing 2.5 to 3 hours of cardio a day on a bag, right? I would go run a mile just to get the heart going. I would while I was waiting, I can remember in the pod, while I was waiting to go to chow, I would just do laps in the pod, just walk laps and do push-ups, get my push-ups on. And then whenever we'd hit the yard, I wouldn't hit the bag right away. I'd go run a mile. It was 2 laps was a mile. So I'd go run 2 laps real quick just to get my lungs opened up. And then I go hit the bag for 2.5 hours, something like that. Tony from Stories Written by a Current Prisoner would never get in the ring. How are you, sir?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
Doing all right. Live right now. Talking to the people on the internet. Let's see. Written by a Current would never get in the ring with Conrad from Mile High Hustle. I would love to see it, though. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe me and Tony could go. You know what I mean? Who did Tony? Tony went with somebody else, right? I remember he was one of the dudes who got his little squab on. Who knows? But anyway, probably gonna call it a night though. Look at this. Food bank. There's food bank soda, right? Just like the old the old boxes of cereal. They just had like wheat puff rice and shit like that, or it would just say pork or whatever. Well, that's government issued soda right there, homeboy. Forgot what it was like to be poor, right? You should box Tony. Oh, I don't know if Tony's ready, bro. I don't know if Tony's ready. Isn't he in a wheelchair? No, I just clowning. No, seriously though, I don't think Tony's ready. Tony needs to keep his ass in the studio, right? Krupp, let's do it live, homie. Let's do it live. Krupp, Thunder Gang. See, Jordan, I agree, but I have to say Tony has really elevated his channel over the last year or so to one that I watch every video. Really? He's doing that good, huh? Good for Tony. Tony needs to keep his ass in the studio, though. Anyway, Thank you, my friends. Let's do a live, Krupp. Let's do a live. Who else is in here? Who does it? Who's got a channel? Thunder Gang. I don't see nobody else. Am I missing anybody? Fortune Thought, Hardworking Man. Mario, you don't got a channel. Jordan, you don't got a channel. HFTL. HFTL should have a channel. That'd be funny. That will be clowning. Should start a channel clowning, my homie. Anyway, I'll see you guys. Have a good night, my friend. David Price, it's nice to see you. You get on your knees as Tony can box in his wheelchair. Now you clowning. Later, my friends. I appreciate you. Hit them likes on the way out, brother. Hit them likes. Later, my friend.